We had two questions that came in quite late on Friday, and I didn't send them over to you. They're kind of general, and I don't know if you want to wait and do those next week, or if you want me to tell you what they are.
I think I'm going to have you send them to me. I'll off air. I'll look at them and see if I need more facts, and we'll do them next week.
Fabulous.
You guys, when you send the questions, we will always preserve your confidentiality, but the more specific you can be about, state, age of child, disability, do they have an IEP or 504 plan? That's all important because the answers vary depending on those things. So
Paige has written in and asked for a link where we can go to for it. And I don't know which it you're talking about. Are you talking about Toner Law Offices, the learning thing, or quality ABA? But why don't we give her all three? If she wanted to, is there a link to where she would go to Toner Law Offices?
It's very easy just to Google it.
Okay. And then for the space that you went to, is it something for this learning? I can't remember.
That's not accessible to the public. I have a subscription.
Okay. So there you go. And then for my money, if you want good quality ABA, my child was treated at CARD. And so I encourage you to go to centerforautism.com for the highest quality of ABA. Okay, so Bonnie, what are we going to talk about? What is on that site this week?
We're going to talk about where we are now. Okay, we're going to talk about where we are now. And first, I want to say, I think at some point, we should have like a town hall meeting about ABA, because of what I'm seeing, guys. I mean, there were always people for whom ABA did not resonate, and a lot of them ended up doing floor time. But they were really in the minority of kids that I saw. And I'm not saying kids can't improve with floor time. I'm sure that they do. But the best results that I saw were from ABA treatment providers that had a lot of fidelity with respect to how they assessed kids and then provided the services. And I have seen, amazing results. I'm also really scared about this because I meet parents now that don't understand what the research said, and they don't understand that not all ABA companies are created equal. And so there are common misunderstandings that I'm seeing. I mean, like in dialogue with somebody who has a science and research background, his ABA provider told him he needs only 6 hours a week of ABA. That was something that it never would have occurred to him to second guess. I shared the research with him. He was
open. Did he lose his mind then?
No, and you know what? To his credit, he was open to hearing the information rather than just going into like a defensive, bug curl position because it's so upsetting to be told your kid has been getting a suboptimal program. No, he's following up. But I had a heartfelt exchange with this person, and I said, one of the sadnesses for me is to get people who say, we did ABA, what's the big deal? And you say, well, what do you mean? And they say, they describe a situation in which someone came into the home a few hours and did parent training, never worked directly with their child. Yeah. So there's, where before we had a small filtering process to go through because it was like CARD and a couple other companies. There's just so many companies out there, and you really have to vet them. And we can talk about how to do that. We don't have to do that now. But
let's have a town hall, though. Let's have a town hall, though.
It's really, really important because when I hear that people are anti-ABA, I mean, this world has to be big enough to allow for a divergence of views, and I don't need anybody to to just lockstep with me because I say that it saved my child's life. But I want to just make sure that if you're of that opinion, that you've had access to really evaluate what a good ABA program would look like. So that's one of the aspects of where we are now, as a country in terms of saving our children's lives with treatment, which, I think I haven't been shy about saying that if your 3-year-old gets a diagnosis of autism, it's not any less urgent than if your child got a diagnosis of leukemia. You've got to intervene. You've got to intervene aggressively, and you got to stay the course. And I mean, for me, it was easier because there was nothing else you. There was like, I went to a few special day classes. They were horrible. They were horrible. I went into my own fetal position and I was like, well, I don't really know about this card thing, but God, it's like saying that he might have some degree of independence by kindergarten. So why don't I just try it till kindergarten? And then if it's really not working, I can always go back to a special day class. Of course, in those days, they weren't, the special day classes weren't sort of like, what is it called? Like when you stage your home to sell it, the special day classes are like staged as if they're going to offer you ABA, but all you're going to get if you get a 1-to-1 aid is a para educator who has, very limited, maybe, 30 hours of online training, 30 hours of training, much of it online and from their district. Okay, so I wasn't even planning on talking about that, but be that as it may, that's one aspect of where we are now. Another aspect of where we are now is we're at the end of the school year. So you aren't going to have to listen to me anymore rant and rave about how you need to have an IEP meeting to talk about what's going to happen in the summer and the fall. The time for that has passed, and we can have specific questions on the air in the future about where you are now with reference to the fall. What exactly does your child's special education universe look like? So where we are now is, we really do need to step back and celebrate for a moment the fact that Betsy DeVos, in her capacity as a spokesperson for federal government, said no more waivers were necessary and the district should continue to provide services per people's IEPs. And we didn't lose that, and we're lucky. And she didn't use the opportunity to gut other parts of the IDEA, specifically the attorney's fees provision, which is always confidential, but it does allow people access to the system in a way that they don't have access otherwise. So for summer, we can have some ESY questions, we can have some comp ed questions if you're thinking about those things. There were a lot of tips that LRP put out about how to have a successful virtual IEP. And I think it's probably late for those things now. I think almost everybody's done with school. If you, for some reason, have an IEP coming up and you have those questions, we can go over them. But the other thing that I wanted to talk about is after your IEP, whatever type of IEP you're having, if you don't understand what you and the district agreed to at this meeting, or the district's offer in the IEP is confusing, you can ask for prior written notice. And prior written notice, which is codified at 34 CFR 300.503, gives you parents the right to ask the district to provide you with an explanation to questions arising out of your IEP concerning the identification, assessment, and implementation of your IEP. So if you have an offer that's ambiguous, and I had a couple where it's just like, hey, wait, I can't keep up. Which thing are you offering? And then I get the IEP and it seems to be at variance with what I recall recording, then I can ask for prior written notice. In other words, I asked you to increase my ABA by 10 hours a week. You said no, you weren't going to do that. I don't understand what your basis is, and I don't understand what research and documents you relied on, and I want prior written notice. And they need to give that to you within a reasonable time. So now is the time basically for you to be reviewing your IEP, making sure that your IEP is in some shape where if school does reopen in the fall, you will be able to have an IEP that is working for you when your child goes back to school, if he or she does in whatever capacity. So, review your IEPs, ask your questions, ask for prior written notice, and then we could take it from there on the show in terms of your questions, because my fear, and what I have been fearing since March 11th, was that there was going to be a huge backlog. There were going to be people that were left in limbo. And that, coupled with the fact that we might be entertaining multiple scenarios in terms of how we would go back to school, whether it's a staggered day, distance learning, some combination of online and in school. I knew that was going to be and, what's the word, varied enough and maybe ambiguous enough and maybe not really codified enough that you really, really needed your IEP document to be tight. And you need to understand what's in your distance learning plan too. If you're in LAUSD, they have on their website, they finally got around to posting their policy on what people were going to get for distance learning, depending on what grades you were going to be in. If your district has a similar policy, you might want to take a look at that. Where I left off last time was talking about medically vulnerable students. And in our larger autism family of children that have disabilities, there are oftentimes serious medical considerations. I would say they're secondary to the disability, but they're really not, because they have to be taken as seriously as a disability. So here's what LRP had to say about medically vulnerable students. Plan now to protect medically vulnerable students when school doors reopen. Students who are immunocompromised or have a history of respiratory illness may be at greater risk of either contracting the coronavirus or experiencing severe symptoms. As districts plan to reopen school buildings and resume school activities, IEP and Section 504 teams should give special thought to how they will program for and place students who are medically fragile. While many concerned parents have already brought these issues to the school's attention, schools should not wait for a parent to raise the issue. Schools should be working proactively this summer to identify students whose underlying medical conditions place them at risk. Sorry about the motorcycle outside. Team considerations. IEP and Section 504 teams should reconvene to determine what accommodations a student may need to remain safe and whether the student may require an alternative placement. To properly consider what accommodations a student needs, the IEP or Section 504 team must know what general modifications the school will be putting in place, right, for everybody, so the team can make an informed decision about what additional steps are necessary. Include the student's primary care physician or medical specialist in the discussion. Teams should be ready to succinctly describe the student's medical condition and what modifications are being made to protect the general student population. Then they should ask for more specific recommendations as to what additional measures might be needed to keep the student safe. Identify students who cannot safely learn in school buildings. These students are at too great a risk regardless of what safeguards are in place. They may need to continue learning online, but that decision must be made by the IEP or 504 team on an individualized basis and with a bit of appropriate data. It is crucial that schools obtain this information from the students' medical providers so they can proceed with developing an alternative program in the home or in another appropriate setting. Keep up with the research. Schools will need to be vigilant about keeping up with current research on COVID-19. Some potential accommodations will depend upon emerging information about the virus, such as whether classroom air filtration might be effective in reducing airborne virus particles. Researchers have more time to study the virus, a better understanding will emerge as to how to effectively minimize the risks at school. Can I keep going or are we out of time?
We're out of time, and I have a question, because my concern with what you just said is that in the current environment that we are in, we've already had a problem with this before we had COVID, that the current medical, it's very hard right now to get a doctor to say that your child is immune compromised because they're afraid of that being misinterpreted because of the vaccine situation. So it is not something that is easy to get right now, to have a medical doctor say that your child is medically fragile, when where 10 years ago that was easy, and your doctor would just give that to you and say, yes, your child has autism and has had this and this and this. But I hear more and more parents saying, my doctor won't say that for me now.
Well, I think your doctor can say that we're still studying the virus and our understanding of it is growing every week. But until we have a vaccine or our knowledge about this is much more complete, I've been treating this student for 8 years, and I think out of an abundance of caution, given his autism, the best way to proceed would be X, Y, and Z. I don't think you have to use the words immunocompromised if that's a trigger word and it's going to cause problems.
Yeah, I
So
do think it is.
in terms of what else there is left to say on this, there's a discussion about programming considerations, flexibility considerations, and a few other things, and we can take that up on the show next week.
Okay.
But you guys, the summer is kind of like our time to get on the whiteboard and figure out what the fall is going to look like, and we can work on that on the show. So bring us your questions, and we're all in this together. Nobody feels expert in this. It's uncomfortable. It's hard to fly by the seat of your pants, but we're going to figure it out.
Okay.
We're going to figure it out.
Thank you so much, Bonnie. We so appreciate you taking the time to be here with us. We adore you. Again, Tollner Law Offices, please Google them. Offices in many locations in California. If you are in Southern California and think that you could
Or Northern California.
Well, but I was going to say in Southern California and you think you need Bonnie. Now, if you need just somebody, whether it's Northern or Southern, Tollner Law Offices covers pretty much the whole state.
Thank you.
Bonnie's here in Southern California.
But I'm working in Northern California and it's fun.
You are? Okay, yeah. Well, I didn't know that. So if you're in California and you think you need Bonnie, then reach out, Google her at Tollner Law Offices, and you can reach directly out to her. She's pretty fabulous. I know this firsthand.
And you know what? I've got time now, but I'm not going to have time later. So, so reach out. I've got a little lull. Yeah, exactly.
Now is the moment. Okay. Thank you so much.
Bye, everybody.
I'm going to call you later on today. So
okay,
thank you.
Lots of love. Right. You guys stay safe.
Bye.
Hey, thanks for watching Autism Live. To subscribe, click here. And if you'd like to check out some more of our videos, click here.